Hello, everybody, and welcome to Now is the Time. Today, I have a very important guest on the show. His name is Patrick Erlandson, and he has, he's working a lot with helping men to overcome porn addiction, but he's also raised up a movement called, well, you can talk about that, Fathers Against Sex Trafficking. And there's an event coming up in a week or so that's going to, or actually a couple days when you see this. And so we're going to be talking to Patrick again. He was on the program last week, but we're going to go into more about how porn is fueling trafficking, how it's such an addictive thing for men in particular, but it's also crossed over into many women now are addicted to porn. And how we can overcome pornography and actually develop an intimacy again, not only with God, but with your wife or husband, and bring unity again to the home. So welcome to the program, Patrick.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Yeah, so now explain a little bit, just recapping about the trafficking and how it's, just maybe go into some of the stats briefly for people that haven't watched the program last week.
Okay, so, basically, I started working with a human trafficking task force in Long Beach about 8 years ago. And I've just really seen, not just is the awareness kind of more prevalent, there's a lot more awareness today than there was 8 years ago, but also trafficking has grown over the past 8 years. It's actually gotten to be a bigger industry, which is really kind of alarming and counterintuitive. You would think that with the increase of awareness, you would also have a decline in trafficking, but that hasn't worked that way, and I think a lot of it is because of the fueling, the fuel that pornography brings to the industry. So you have, through internet pornography, you're having an increase in trafficking victims. In America, we have between 100 to 300,000 young people and children, average age somewhere between 12 and 14 is what is now thought to be the case. And a lot of people who are now in their 20s who were trafficked started when they were 12 or 13. So it's going to younger and younger people. There are some really concerning things that have happened, like passing, one of the laws that was passed here in California is that under 18, you can't be arrested for prostitution. And that was kind of with the intention of basically taking someone who's a child and saying that they're not a criminal, that they've been actually exploited. So they're the ones that shouldn't be paying the price. It should be the trafficker who's getting arrested and going to prison, not the girl.
Well, I know I interviewed the district attorney last year, Tony Rikakis of Orange County. For 20 years, he'd been the DA, and he was saying that they changed their view. They were seeing the girl as more of a victim.
Exactly.
And he said the average age is between 12 and 14.
Right.
But I think it's even getting younger.
Well, I think you're right. And boys are increasing in those ranks. It's not just girls, but now we're getting more and more boys. But I think one of my fears with the law, I completely agree. These should be seen as victims. They shouldn't be seen as criminals and perpetrators of a crime. But with that law, you now have, a minor is not going to get arrested. So if you're a trafficker, having a minor as your product, it's not going to be taken off the shelf while she's in juvenile hall or getting put in the system. So my concern is just that made actually younger victims more attractive to traffickers. And we'll see how it turns out, but I think that's my concern, is that you when we try to do something good, try to do something that's protective of the victim, but then you end up making, actually, it can be worse for the victims. But that's just one of my concerns.
Well, now going to the stats on porn, this Pornhub, how many, sites, there's literally probably thousands, if not millions of these porn sites. Is that
right.
correct?
Pornhub is probably, it's either the biggest or one of the biggest in the world as far as what they're putting out, the content that they put out. And I believe it is 6,000 videos a day that they release into the internet.
And it's all based up monetarily. What type of money are they making in the porn industry? Oh,
billions and billions. I think the breakdown is something it's more than all of the tar companies, Google. The amount of money that's being generated by the porn industry is massive. It's one of the largest generators of funding.
And in my research, one girl can bring in typically $250,000 a year tax-free. So you got 4 girls, that's almost $1 million tax-free. So you can see why it's surpassing drug trafficking. If you get caught with drugs, you go to jail. You know, if you get caught with a girl, a lot of times they have the Stockholm syndrome, and you know they're
won't
already
testify.
engaged with their trafficker.
Right. Well, and I think that's one of the things that's most confusing to people who don't really understand the issue, just looking at it from the outside. Why don't the girls run away? I mean, that's the thing. One of the first questions you hear when you talk about girls being out on the street, or boys that are increasingly out on the streets being sold, and which doesn't even touch on how many people are being sold online. But the idea that if it was so miserable, if they were really being exploited, if this was against their will, why don't they just run away? But you don't realize that, especially in America, in the majority of cases, this is someone that they think cares about them. So their trafficker is someone who says that he loves them, that he cares about them, that this is something that they're doing for their future. So she has spent months revealing herself to this guy. He's been patient. He's been listening. He knows everything about her. He knows who she loves and who she hates in her family. He knows every complaint, and then he uses that against her in order to keep her in his stable. And
Well, we just finished the first series called The Grooming, The Seduction. And, you know, we had a former pimp named Mark who now is a pastor, and it's an amazing story. But he said, I was a master manipulator. He said, I told them everything they wanted to hear. And, you know, the Romeo pimp, as you know, is the ones that start telling the girl everything they want, giving them, buying them things, this and that. Before you know it, you know, Ashley, one of the girls on the tape, Ashley Trevino, she's been on the program before. She said that after 3 months, all of a sudden one day he slapped her and he said, you're going to work for me. We know where you live. We'll kill your family. I mean, at that time she was so sucked in,
right.
you know, emotionally and psychologically. And then the terror factor with the fact that we know where you live and we will kill your family. Opal Singleton said, if they say they're going to do that, she goes, you better believe that they'll try.
Yeah. I mean, there have been cases here. I heard from LAPD, and this wasn't kind of made public, but that there was a girl who was set on fire and dumped out on the freeway because she was trying to leave. And it was a message to the other girls that you just don't leave. And that they keep people under their thumb. And I think the other is that it's very similar to domestic violence, in that the person ends up beating her or inflicting pain on her because she's refusing to go out to work, because she thinks that this is her boyfriend, and he's making it very clear that she has to go to work. But then it's always like, look what you made me do. Right? So it's always being turned back. So you're always trying to get the victim to own their pain. And this is because of what you did. You're refusing to help us. You're refusing to go out and work. I'm trying to look out for our best interests, and you're the one who's betraying our love. And that's what, to me, is that you take a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old, and she's trying to navigate what love is, and she's trying to navigate whether or not she's worth love. And you have somebody that then's putting all of that responsibility on her. That's really tragic.
Well, it's tragic, and that's why, you know, men like you that step up to the plate, you know, are some of my heroes that, you know, that you've jumped into this. Now, you are working with men that you're literally standing up and say that we're against sex trafficking. Tell us a little bit about Father Con.
So Father Con was really born out of trying to understand the causes of the vulnerability that allow girls to get trafficked or boys to get trafficked, and also looking at the sense of entitlement that is fueling and driving a person to feel like it's okay for me to buy your body for 20 minutes. You know, it's like we've had cases of autistic children being sold. So it means there are boys coming out of our homes. There are boys that are growing up in our families that are going out and feeling that somehow it's okay for me to pay for sex with an 11-year-old autistic child. And that to me is just shocking and deserves a tremendous amount of our attention to look at why are these boys coming out of our homes like this?
I know. I was talking to one of my friends. In fact, we did some reenactments in the series that we have, you know, of staging some of the events that looked like what we were talking about. And Caitlin's an actress, and she said, I was just getting gas, you know, just right down the street from my house. The guy pulled up to, you know, and she said, I wasn't really dressed seductive. But he came up and he said, hey, he goes, hotel across the street, here's $100, you know, 15 minutes. And she looked at him like going, no, sorry. You know, no, but what would give a guy, what would he think that he can just go up to a woman and just say, hey, there's a hotel room, 100 easy dollars, 15 minutes. It just, it's something that they've been groomed. The men
Right,
have been as
exactly.
groomed as the women.
Exactly. And it's so normalized. And I mean, you had mentioned it another time about Grand Theft Auto. You have it within games. You go and you pay for a prostitute, then you pick out how you want to kill her, and then you kill her and you take your money back. But there's just such a normalizing of the kind of pimp and prostitution kind of a world. My mother used to be a dance teacher, and she was watching Dancing with the Stars, and Cher was the guest judge. And Cher's compliment to the dancer was, "You look like a pimp out there." And so you have this, using this terminology where you're normalizing it. You're Eminem songs where he talks about rape and the woman enjoys it. And you have this culture that boys are growing up in. And so you just start to think, it just becomes normal. All girls are willing to take money for sex. In the same way that traffic victims are saying all men are interested in paying for sex. So guys start to see girls as being, they're just in it for the money, and every girl is a hooker. And
that's the pornification of a culture. But
exactly right.
Good news is that there's people that are standing up, they're learning, they're growing, and this knowledge is getting out there.
Yeah.
Like we talked about this on the last show, they're literally trying to target young kids. I know a girl I know is, there's an autistic child that, she's a nanny for. And she said one day the kid came home from school and said, hey, he had on his iPad, porn had just come on it out of nowhere. So these these people are actually trying to get in to these kids. He was at school when this happened.
Right. Well, and there's also one thing that people are not talking about, but they're going to be, is just the sharp increase in child-on-child sexual assault. And that you have boys watching porn, and they just grab a girl from their school and take her into the bathroom, and they're trying to reenact what they've seen in porn. And that's really growing. In the UK, they've done a number of series and really broken it down. Just the thousands of times more in the last, with unlimited access to porn, you have this very sharp increase in boys and girls kind of acting out what they're seeing in porn. It's very frightening. And that's only going to get worse. I mean, as long as you can just get
one
it
of
on
my
your cell
friends, their daughter was, working in a recovery home or something up in Northern California, and one of the guys literally brutalized this one outside. She was going to her car, and I guess he had come out of prison or something. He wasn't that old, but he tried to sexually assault her. But I mean, she almost died.
Yeah.
She's in the hospital still. But I mean, and it was like, like you said, it's crazy. As they start younger and younger, and their brain gets hooked into that dopamine. Literally explain, Patrick, what happens to the brain of a kid when they first see porn and what it does and why it's so addictive.
Well, you're mixing such extreme imagery. So this is not just looking at breasts, or it's not just looking at, at the body anymore. It's extreme imagery of force and I mean, without getting graphic, but it's so much more extreme than anything that I grew up with when I was a kid, and this becomes like a daily diet, and so it unleashes all of the pleasure centers of the brain are just unlocked. So you're having just a massive release of dopamine into the brain. So there's a stimulation that is felt through the whole body, and then it's too much. So the brain will start to turn off receptors. It'll start to turn off the release of the dopamine because it's too much. And so then you're trying to get back that rush again. And so it increases the novelty that you're seeking for. And so that's what we find in studies of men who watch pornography, it increases. And so especially with young people too, these are all new images to them. These are whole new concepts. They have no idea of kind of like really what's normal, what isn't. So they're not hearing from their parents about the realities of sex between a man and a woman. They're not getting that education, so they're turning to porn, or they're finding it in porn, and they're shaping their whole view of how women want to be treated, how they should be treating people as a guy, and also kind of who they should be. So you have an increase in bisexuality, you have an increase in interest in group sex and all kinds of things that wouldn't be acceptable otherwise. And I think that coupled with, you have Teen Vogue as a magazine that's accepted, parents are buying this for their teenage daughters. And Teen Vogue was teaching how to have anal sex in one issue. And you had a doctor who was saying that she's a sex worker and legitimizing sex work. And now the last I heard was sex work is listed now as a career choice for teenage girls. I mean, it's just the thought of that, where you're normalizing it on so many levels. You're normalizing it for girls. You're normalizing the behavior for boys. It's new territory.
Well, and this is the thing, as it says in the days of Sodom and Gomorrah, so shall it be in the days of the coming of Jesus.
Yeah.
And, this has gone on through the ages, but now with the, the media, with the internet, everybody's got a smartphone. It's at our fingertips. You see these little kids like, just born almost, learning how to use the internet. Because it keeps them, it keeps their amusement. Kids the parents are just saying, here, it's the babysitter.
Yeah.
And somehow, a lot of these porn sites, something will come up, it won't look like porn, but you click on it,
right.
and then all of a sudden it'll be a full-on porn.
That's right. And so many searches are linked to porn. So that the whatever you search for, even if it's not specific to porn, that's what'll come up. And if you just put in sex, it's like hundreds of thousands of sites will pop up that you can go through.
Well, so let's talk about the redemption of this. The FatherCon, what's going to happen? What day is it and where is it?
So FatherCon is Saturday, November 9th. It's going to be at Warren High School in Downey. It's a one-day conference, but it's also, so we called it FatherCon, and the intention was this is a conference, but it's also the beginning of a conversation. And we just really, as men, as fathers, we really have to just get real about what we go through. Men are often just kind of internalized. They keep everything inside. And if they have a struggle, then they feel that they're not good enough, so they're not going to put themselves in a position of authority because they feel accused. So we wanted to create an environment where it's not a shaming and blaming, and it's definitely not a nudge and a wink, and boys will be boys. This is our time to get real and really look at who we are as fathers and the impact that we have on our children and on our neighborhoods and communities. So
and who are some of the speakers? You were telling me about some of the people that are going to be there. Now, this is Downey, California.
Downey, California. It's at Warren High School, and it'll be in the gym. We have a capacity for 400 people, so it's limited. So we really hope that as many people will register as soon as possible. Eventbrite, you can register there. We have the website, which is FatherCon or father-con.com, so we can be reached there. And then we have speakers like Alan Smith, who's the executive director of Saving Innocence, and he's written a book, Prized Possession, about the father-daughter relationship. We have Armand King, who's a former trafficker, who now works to advise the police and works within the African-American community specifically for boys not to take the path that he took. And we have speakers on foster care. We have Jeremy Greening, who's giving a talk on pornography and the impact that it has on the family. We have Donald Parrish, who's coming from Texas, who's a pastor of a church in southern Dallas, who is incredible in his getting men to step up as mentors to children who don't have a dad. So these different topics that we'll be bringing up, one will be on cyber, kind of whole cyber safety. And I think our theme this year is being a father in the 21st century. It's just a whole new ballgame. We're dealing with issues and problems that have never existed before. The internet has unlocked, the internet, like you were talking about your smartphone, one guy refers to it as the brothel in your pocket. You now have access to hardcore porn every single minute of every single day through the smartphone. We're dealing with, any predator has access to your child through the internet, coming in through the internet. And one FBI agent was saying that it's more dangerous for your child to be home alone with a computer than to be wandering around the mall by themselves. There's more threats now online.
Well, I heard so there's really you give your kid a smartphone, you literally open him up to 5 million predators.
Yeah, right.
5 million. Well, and we were talking about this earlier. God created, sex. God created it between a man and a woman in marriage. And I know my sister and brother-in-law, they were virgins when they got married at 25, and they didn't have to know, I mean, that's rare, but they didn't have to know what it was like to be with, 10, 20 other people, and they didn't compare. They were just one-on-one, and they have a very good relationship. In fact, they've proven that the best marriages are the ones that really haven't had a lot of physical intimacy before.
Yeah, there was a study done in England that ended up with, that was the conclusion, was that the fewer sex partners you had previous to marriage, or if you hadn't had any, you were able to be happier in marriage. And I think a lot of people don't think so. And you have that whole concept of spreading your seed, before you get married. Sowing your oats. It's a crazy idea, because all you're doing is creating a database of people to compare to. So these are all going to be measured up against your wife. You love your wife, but you're going to constantly be comparing her to, this person did this better, or this person did this better. Who wants that? It's more destructive to a marriage and to family happiness than it is producing anything.
Well, one of my friends, her daughter got married, and they're not married anymore. This wonderful young woman, I'm not going to say her name, but the night before the bachelor party, the guys ended up getting a prostitute for her husband to be. And, when she ended up consummating the marriage or whatever, all I can say, she ended up getting an STD. And you know what? It was just horrible. And eventually, she finally told her, and it literally broke apart the marriage. So you're seeing this more and more with people.
Yeah, and just the bringing pornography into the home and into the relationship is also just so destructive and damaging. And the other thing, like what you're saying too, I mean, I know guys who are introduced to sex by their fathers taking them to a brothel. And so your first experience with sexual intimacy is with a person that's been paid to have sex with you. So that then normalizes the whole concept of paying for sex. And I think then you have this growing movement, the incel movement, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but it's involuntarily celibate. And you have this growing number of men, the young guy who shot the women outside the sorority in Santa Barbara, and also the guy who drove his car down the street in Toronto and killed all those people. In both cases, they were members of this incel kind of a community. And this idea that I'm entitled to sex, I'm a guy, this is a need, I'm entitled to it. If you deprive me of sex, then you should be punished. And so there's a whole celebration whenever guys kill women, because you're punishing women for denying you your right. And those kind of things are just terrifying to me. And that young man in Santa Barbara was taken to a brothel in Nevada because his son was frustrated and wasn't able to have a girlfriend, so the father took him there thinking that was the remedy, and it resulted in, I think, seven girls being murdered.
Well, we only have a couple minutes left. Let's end it with some good news. Just a couple minutes. Why don't you kind of look in the camera for a couple minutes? You work with men on how to overcome porn and things like that. You've seen, I'm sure, some success stories many times.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I mean, I think the understanding of the brain today is also very exciting, that we understand now that things are not fixed. So whatever struggles we do have, there are ways to heal. And I think, for me, my motivation in everything that I do is the prodigal son story. And that I think, we have all of these things that have seduced us away. As men, we've had all these forces and temptations and things that have drawn us away with the temptation that there's something better out there. There's someone better than my wife. There's something more exciting, something I'm missing out on. I got to go out and get it. And then we find out that that's a false promise. It doesn't deliver on what we thought we were going to get. And the realization that God just wants his kids home again. God just wants his kids to come home. And he's not there to smack us down and to judge us and shame us. He wants us to work through the things that we've done, but he really wants us to come home again and be the father to us that he created us to be, the children that he wants to have. And that's accessible to us. That's there for us. It's been bought and paid for us, and we just have to go and claim that. Of course, it's difficult because the brain rewires. There's whole neural pathways that have been created based on our actions. So we have to undo that by undoing those actions and doing things in reverse. We need good habits. We need the support of men. There's organizations like Covenant Eyes and that gives kind of accountability, assigns an accountability partner for each guy, so that you have someone you can turn to when you're struggling, when something is triggering you, when you're in that vulnerable place, you can turn to someone. We need more and more of that. We need more and more guys who have successfully left kind of the influence of porn to be mentors for guys who are still struggling. Before it's too late, we're seeing increasing numbers of divorce, increasing numbers of children who are now not going to have a father present because of porn addiction, because of being pulled into thinking you're going to be more satisfied somewhere else. And really our happiness, our joy as men is actually when we can have the intimacy with a spouse and with our children that really produces happiness and joy. And that's what we want to accomplish at FatherCon. That's what I want to accomplish through all of my work with men.
Wow, well said. Well, thanks for coming to the program today, Patrick,
Yeah,
and thanks for watching Now Is the Time. As you can see that this is a very, very serious topic. A lot of people don't necessarily want to know about it, but it's imperative that we do. We can change, we can make a difference in the culture. If you'd like to contribute to what we're doing, you can go onto my website, it should be on the screen, marycrouley.com, spelled MERICROULEY.com. I'm doing an event called the Holiday Freedom Bash on December 7th, Pearl Harbor Day. We're going to have some people like Opal Singleton, who is literally an expert in the field. We have a couple survivors that are going to be sharing. But then we're going to have some beautiful music, a wonderful holiday Christmas buffet, and we're going to be able to interact with one another and learn how we can prevent this through the community. Tickets are $75, and there's only a limited amount. So we hope to see you at that event as well. God bless you. Thanks for watching Now Is the Time. And remember, now is the time for you to make a difference in our world by taking action. See you next week.